Thank you very much, all of you, for taking time out. At a time like this, we're looking at images that are certainly heartbreaking. We are unable to verify it, but we're going by verified handles of Israeli journalists who are putting out these images. Could I ask Helit to step in here first? Please go on, Helit, if you can give us a sense of what you see happening in Israel right now. Hamas terrorists have attacked Israel on most corners, through air, through water, and by road. In every sense, they've come out as jihadis, are attacking Israelis, Israeli homes, civilians being attacked. And this is a point of absolute torture for the Israeli government, as they have counterattacked, but yet have lost out on 500 of their civilians.
Yes, unfortunately, the numbers here are possibly even higher than that. We're going to be versed of it continually throughout the next coming days, because the Israeli Defense Forces are very, very meticulous about notifying families of those who were murdered before they let out the full numbers. Having said that, this is the most murderous attack that we've known inside in terms of terrorism. While it was less successful through water and air, it was unfortunately quite successful through ground. We're still in the midst of fighting. Not only our forces there, but Israelis, anybody who's served in the army, people are taking arms and volunteering to make sure that we can clear the southern area and free all those who are still sequestered, all those who still need rescuing. And that is the first thing to be dealt with before we move on to the next phases of this war, which unfortunately I feel has just begun.
Right. Bringing in Patrick Pine, if you could give us your sense of what we see here. Israel and Palestine in war yet again. But this kind of attacks on Israel has not happened in the last decade or so. So this was meticulously planned. It was strategized and came in right at a time when there was an auspicious holiday, a festival that Israel was observing. So it's tragic to see that innocent lives are lost in this.
Nabila, good evening. This is Patrick. See, let me tell you a few points. What happened for the last 2 days, it was not a terror attack. It was not a run-of-the-mill terror attack. It was a military-grade invasion.
Right.
You know, when you have 5,000 rockets being hurled at you, it is war. And it was a military-grade invasion which had considerable amount of logistical preparations, intelligence inputs, planning, and it is for sure there were external elements which were supporting and giving those things to the Hamas, because Hamas on its own to do something like this, where they could even outmaneuver the air defense systems of Israel, which is one of the best, the Iron Dome. They could do that. They exactly knew where to paraglide. They exactly knew where are the points to which they can sneak in, where probably the security was not at the best situation. You know what happened? The manner in which they humiliated, they tortured, they desecrated the bodies of dead, the manner in which what they did with the women, I think, and then they videographed it to put it on the social media.
Yeah.
They exactly knew, Nabila, what they were doing. They knew that it would have a very, very serious consequence. They knew that there will be retaliation. It will be a brutal retaliation. Frankly speaking, Nabila, Hamas doesn't care for the fact that thousands of Palestinians now in Gaza would also die. And then the very Hamas would actually again videograph and show to the world to play the victim card and show that this is what Israel has done. This is the game plan. And let me tell you, one of the prime reason what it is being done, I'm sure there are other countries which are involved. There are reports that many of the weapon systems which are being used in this time, which could outmaneuver the defensive mechanism of Israel, are probably smuggled in from Afghanistan, the ones that have been left over with the Americans. The other important thing is that, you know, after this thing happens, and there is a possibility of Lebanon, Hezbollah in Lebanon doing a similar attack from the northern side, passions will be whipped up so much in the whole of Middle Eastern region that the efforts of Abraham Accord, which was meant to reconcile, you know, Israel with the Arab states, that will go for a toss. And that is exactly the objective.
You know, the best person to possibly give us a perspective of the Israel government's move and the military's move there of Israel is spokesperson of the Israel Defense Forces, Major Libby Weiss. Thank you very much, Major Libby. I'm very sorry to see what we're seeing happening in Israel right now. We know that you've been taken by complete surprise. It's taken a whole 24 hours for the army to react. And by the time you've lost out on nearly 500 of your civilians, the videos are really heartbreaking. Would you tell us what are the standing orders that you've given to your civilians to ensure their protection? And if you could divulge details on your next move.
Well, of course, as been mentioned, and as we see here in the footage, really what is taking place is horrifying, a national tragedy and the largest massacre that has ever taken place against Israeli civilians since the establishment of the country. Right now, the IDF is working to secure the communities in southern Israel to make sure that Hamas is no longer there, no longer present and active in those areas. It is an ongoing battle now as we speak. We know that there are hostages that are there, and the IDF is operating to really secure those communities. The IDF is also working to evacuate civilians from communities in the south to put some distance between them and what's taking place. And right now, the IDF is striking Hamas targets within the Gaza Strip to make sure that Hamas does not have the military capabilities to continue in this campaign that was launched yesterday, this invasion that really is the correct word to describe what we are seeing here. And we anticipate that the situation will continue. It is a dynamic one and it's certainly a complex one, but the tragedy is profound.
You know, do tell us, Miss, as we see here, the videos that are emerging are all mostly what we are seeing on social media platforms. Is there a way to verify them? We're seeing blasts. We're seeing families of Israeli families taken hostage. Could you corroborate the footage that we have here of one entire Israeli family who've been taken in as hostage? One of the daughters have been killed. We believe the Hamas terrorists have conveyed to the family that your daughter has now gone to heaven, that she's been sacrificed for a larger cause.
I can't confirm all of these images that we are seeing, but of course they're horrifying. We understand that this is a process that it requires some time and is a meticulous process, and we are trying to do that along with other bodies as soon as possible. But we understand that the tragedy here is massive, that the loss of life is significant, that the torture, the callous regard that Hamas has paid to civilians, the way they've been dragged across the border, butchered in the streets. I mean, it truly is horrifying, I think, to anybody who is watching this around the world, and it gives us a very clear picture of the enemy that we've been fighting for a long time.
Well, the enemy is right your neighbor, and it appears that all the peace treaties that have been brought to fore over the decades have fallen flat. It's futile, really. All the efforts towards working for peace between Israel and Palestine has really borne absolutely no fruit. In fact, it's worsened, as we see with what has happened in the last 48 hours. Relationship has gone downhill. Is there an assurance that you have received from a larger body? If I can bring in Halit Barrel here on this, who's a former director at the Israeli National Security Council. Halit, tell us a little on the backing that Israeli has at this point and the kind of tacit support that Hamas terrorists are receiving too.
I didn't quite understand your question. Can you please repeat it?
The support that Israel is receiving at this point, apart from Joe Biden assuring that Israel is an ally, is there any substantial support for your benefit?
Look, I think what's transpired here is very clearly a line in the sand. Nobody can really support these kind of acts of terrorism, heinous war crimes, heinous treatment of individuals, civilians who have nothing to do with combat, babies taken. I mean, I don't want to get too graphic because that's what Hamas wants. It wants us to get graphic. But the graphic photos that Hamas has let out and the way it has conducted itself around this has only brought stronger support from Israel, from all nations that have weighed in against this and on Israel's side. And I want to make clear what this means is that Israel will have far more freedom of action militarily when it comes to the retribution phase. This is what this support means. So there is by no means an issue where we're going to see the same kind of military actions that we've seen before. It was mentioned before that Iran is behind that. That is very, very true. We have to understand that Iran is not only behind that, Iran is behind Hezbollah. This is a very concerted effort. And while Iran is using proxies, I think the time is over for that kind of mass conflict in the Middle East. You mentioned the peace efforts before. As you know, Prime Minister Netanyahu was talking about peace with the Saudis. So was the Saudi leader, so was Joe Biden. And clearly, Iran doesn't like that. Now, this was well planned long ago. This is not an operation that came together in a few weeks, but the timing, I don't doubt, had to do with trying to make sure that moderate countries in the Middle East do not get together.
Yeah. You know, a quick word from Major Libby as well. Major Libby, we see that this war has had far-reaching effects as well. As much as we see many of the neighboring countries, including Lebanon, Egypt, the Hamas terrorists are trying to seek support and wanting to involve them in war, though there hasn't been any official word on that. We saw today an Egyptian police officer firing at a group of Israeli tourists, and 2 tourists were killed, including one Egyptian himself. How would you look at this?
I think it's very clear to us that we are monitoring and are staying as up to date, certainly as everything is happening about what's going on across our borders. As you mentioned, we saw mortar fire from Hezbollah launched to Israel early this morning. We are monitoring the situation very, very, very closely. We want to send a very clear message as well to any other terror organization or other country to not test us, to not get involved in this. And of course, we will make sure that Hamas no longer has the capacity to carry out these kinds of attacks. But we are monitoring the situation on our borders very closely at this time.
Right. Stay with us. Ashok Sajanhar, who's a former Indian diplomat, is also joining us. Sir, would you give us your understanding on how would you look at people who justify the attacks from the Hamas terrorists, saying that this is Palestine wanting to be heard? What about atrocities that have happened in Palestine? There's a movement that says Free Palestine. They've been struggling for peace themselves for decades, nearly a century. So do not look at selective outrage. Also speak up for Palestine at the same time. This is the kind of voices I've heard in the last 48 hours as well.
You know, I think one thing is clear here, Nabila, that as far as the governments in West Asia are concerned, in the Middle East are concerned, they will find it increasingly difficult to justify this sort of action by the Hamas. Hamas is, it is not a fight between 2 nations. It is a fight, it's an attack by a terrorist organization, which has been labeled as a terrorist organization, on another country. And the savagery that they have displayed, I think that will make it very, very difficult for these countries to say anything in favor. Initially, when the full details of this carnage, of the attack, and the attitude and the behavior of the Hamas fighters, maybe that was not available. There might have been, some sort of guarded indication of support for them. But after all these details that have become available, I don't think it will be possible for many countries. And I think we also need to recognize that the circumstances have changed very radically over the last few years, whether it is, of course, starting with the Camp David Accords and the Oslo Accords in the 80s and the 90s, but more recently, the Abraham Accords also has brought Israel and several of the countries in the Middle East closer together, whether it is the establishment of diplomatic relations between Israel and the UAE. Also, we launched, the 4 countries launched the I2U2 project, Israel, US, UAE, and India. So there also these relations, this engagement has been going strongly. And even between Israel and Saudi Arabia, we've seen in the IMEC connectivity project, the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, there also we have seen that it is Saudi Arabia, Israel, Jordan, all these countries are coming together So I think support...
so this is, and it almost appears as if this was strategic enough, even as you say, Mr. Ashok, that this is a terrorist organization. Hamas has still received support from Iran. Iran as a country is celebrating. We saw visuals. Major Libby, if you could step in on this, a quick word from you on the countries that are celebrating this attack and are tacitly supporting the Hamas terror organization. Do we know officially of any kind of substantial monetary help that Hamas is receiving from any of these countries, or help in terms of ammunition?
Well, we do know that over the last several years, Hamas has received significant support from Iran. And I think this speaks to a larger coalition that is really aimed at targeting Israeli civilians and aimed at wiping Israel off the map. Hamas is very open about this as their goal. We understand that they're working closely with others who share this kind of view. And I think this only really echoes the severity and the magnitude of this kind of attack on Israeli soil and against truly innocent Israeli civilians.
Well, I'm really sorry to see what's happening. India has been, of course, in full support of Israel at this point. A last word that I take from you, Halit Barrel, on a word of assurance that the Israeli government has given to its people. What kind of orders have been given for civilians to stay indoors? And, of course, I'd like to ask you about Indians currently in Israel. Would you have a word for them?
Yes, we are now in a state of emergency. At least through the central part and the southern part of the country. Then it probably will be extended up to the north. This means staying at home, following all what is said as to sheltering, which is very important, taking those steps. They're simple, they protect you, they save lives. As long as you're not in the south, you can get through these missiles attacks. They're very stressful. I have children that I take with me every time, but we know how to deal with this. So this is what it is. It's a state of emergency. Stay in as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because I fear that we have very long days still ahead of us.
Right. Final word, Major Libby. Would you be able to establish for us the official numbers in terms of casualties in Israel, and also on the Palestinian side, if you have a report?
Well, of course, the number of casualties on the Israeli side is, of course, continuing to grow tragically. As of now, we're looking at northwards of 600 casualties on the Israeli side, thousands of injuries, some of those very, very severe injuries, and tens of people, Israelis who have been kidnapped into the Gaza Strip. So it is a very, very significant, tragic, horrific event that is taking place. And I fear that those numbers will be increasing in the next hours and days.
And do you believe you have help and you have enough that you have to fight back the Hamas terrorists at the moment? Do you feel confident?
We are doing everything. We are doing everything that we can. We, of course, will do whatever is possible and all options maintained available to us to protect our citizens and our home, and to make sure that Hamas cannot do something like this again.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time right in the midst of this war. Major Libby, Halit Barrel, and also our panelists here on our show, Mr. Penn, our strategic affairs expert, as well as Ashok Sajjan, our former Indian diplomat. Really appreciate your time on this.